The reason I'm making this video is because I think it was Richard, one of the subscribers, just commented that, what was it, Mr. Sucker Pump came early, and yeah, I don't know if he's right or not. Maybe I was going at it a little bit ferociously last time, so I just thought I would take a little bit more time and have another go. But one thing I would say is that it's not really very reflective, this, of the part that I was trying to remove earlier. I'm just trying to get rid of this opto isolator at the moment, but I can actually see the legs on this opto isolator do look quite a lot thinner than that switching regulator we were trying to remove. Right, I can just go for this top pin now. Next to it, so that's molten. So I'm not sure if Richard was right in his comment. Maybe Mr. Suck Pump did come a little early, but I've got this quite large tip on at the moment. I'm just going to try and change it down to something a bit smaller and see if that makes any difference. Unfortunately, I've lost my little brass pad that I'd normally use for cleaning the tips on these, so we're just going to use this little brass brush, and hopefully it should be good enough. See, that really didn't seem to do anything at all, did it? Let's go try for a little bit of an unblock. It sounds blocked, but it shouldn't be. This thing's definitely not blocked. It's almost as though this paste station, when you put one of the smaller tips in, it just doesn't seem to have enough vacuum force. And let's just try putting a bit of tin on there, because it doesn't really seem to have heated through. Just really feeble, that, really feeble. I want to give this every possible chance of working. Like I say, I've never actually been very happy with this this paste. It looks like it's an SODRX Tractor SX90, and compared with the old Weller unit I used to have, I don't know if it was a Weller, or the paste unit I had before this, but the vacuum pump on this is just really feeble, really poor. But I'm going to give it the best chance we can. So there's actually a replaceable cartridge in here, so I'm going to just take that out and we'll put another one in. Okay, so this is the little, well, it's not reusable, it's a little solder cartridge that it basically sucks up all the solder and it holds it in here, and it gives you something nice to dispose of. But I guess the other thing it does is it just allows them to charge you for something that you don't really need, because obviously a little glass tube would be just as effective, and that's what we used to have for years. So instead of using a little glass tube which you could just tip the contents out and reuse, they sell you these little disposable items. And yeah, I'm going to leave it up to your own imagination to maybe give some clues to what that looks like.
It's a telescope! A telescope with a
it's about as absorbent when it comes to absorbing lead solder as well. So basically we get little mousey here and we put him in the tube. And then very simply he said, put that in there, turn it. So it's quite neat and convenient, but yeah, I don't think it works as well as the old, you know, the old little glass tubes that these used to have in them. Maybe it's a little bit more Rolsch compliant. Okay, so I'm still not really happy about some of the temperatures that we were achieving. So what I was trying to do earlier, I had the solder sucker on the back of the component, and I was trying to see if the heat was transferring through to a point where it would melt the leg, and I was trying to reach around and flow some solder onto it, and yeah, I couldn't do it. So basically I'm going to have another go now. Maybe that's interesting because I'm trying to suck it off, but the heat doesn't actually seem to have transferred through. Ah, there we go, it's gone there. So I don't know why, but we've just got this one joint that stubbornly doesn't seem to want to desolder, and yeah, I've got no idea why. Probably very crude, but I'm just wondering if I can get a temperature measurement at the tip of the solder sucker. Well, if that's to be believed, it's nowhere near as hot as I thought it was. Just looking at it, I'm trying to think, is there a ground plane behind that pin? Let's just try on the end of the thermocouple and move it away from the ground plane. So the tip of the solder sucker has given us a reading of 273 degrees. So the heating element on this paste is measuring, well, it's only measuring about 270, which does seem a little bit on the low side, doesn't it? Well, quite a lot on the low side. Okay, so the tip of my normal soldering iron is measuring 335 degrees, and it's actually set to 360. But I've often thought that this paste soldering iron, I've often thought the temperature on it is a bit low, because I often run this at around 270, but in theory 270 is actually quite hot, but that's usually what I find it solders best at. Well, I'm wondering how accurate the temperature of these paste irons is regulated, because well, you know, you never get quite the same reading at the tip. I mean, it's all down to the tip size, isn't it? Stuff like that. So I've just turned the temperature up now on the desoldering tool, and we'll have another go. Let's see if it's coming up. Okay, so we're at, I don't know, 370 now. That's more like it, isn't it? Let's have another go. So it does look like increasing the temperature there has definitely helped, and I'm really surprised at what a difference it made. I think the problem was when I changed from the larger tip to the smaller tip, obviously the thermal conductivity of the smaller tip was much less, and so we weren't just transferring enough heat through to actually melt the solder properly. And I think that I think the solder was probably getting into kind of what you would call a plastic state, but it certainly wasn't fully molten, was it? So now we have got the solder to a fully molten state, we are in a better position to suck the solder away. Giving it a bit of a suck round, and I'm just trying to pull the thing off now with a screwdriver, and I'm not being careful, and I could have spent a lot more time trying to clear the trying to clear the holes out, but I just didn't bother because this was only a quick and dirty test. So when I removed that chip, I managed to rip the track off with it. The next one looks okay. The next one I desoldered so badly you can actually see the remnants of the pen still in the hole. Here's another one, that one seems okay. Next one seems okay. Next one is okay. Let me see if I can move you along a little bit. Next one's okay. And that one's okay. Let's see if we can get it on the other side. Next one looks good. That looks clear. Next one is clear. Next one is clear. And I think the next one I've ripped the pad off, haven't I? Okay, so I've just made a change to what you would call, you know, a traditional desoldering pump, which is one of those spring-loaded syringe affairs. And when you see it on the microscope, it's actually amazing what quite a violent process it is using one of these desoldering pumps. It really does have quite a lot of recoil. It goes with a real bang, doesn't it? I don't know if it was an old wives' tale, but one of the things that people used to tell me about using these old-fashioned desoldering pumps was to actually put the board on top of something like some ragging, a soft surface, so that when the desoldering tool bounces and recoils, as you can see it doing, the idea is that it wouldn't damage the pad, wouldn't bounce against the pad and end up ripping it off. So I don't know whether that helps or if it's an old wives' tale. Well, that's a big molten blob of solder, isn't it? What I was trying to do is I actually just ran some more solder onto the joint. So I just flowed some more solder there onto the joint to actually give us something to actually suck off, and to just to increase the you know, the thermal conduction between the tip of the iron and the actual leg of the opto isolator that we're trying to move. Now I'm sure you can see there how badly contaminated the tip of the soldering iron is there. I'm actually quite embarrassed there, quite ashamed to have such a dirty end. So let's have a go at ripping this off. I'm afraid there's absolutely no elegance here. Go on, get off, you bugger. Get off. Ah! It's putting up a bit of a fight, this one. Let's just pull its legs off. Here we go. Right, come. So let's see the damage. Okay, I can see that I've quite happily managed to rip. Oh, we've left a pin in one of the holes there. That's fantastic. And we've ooh, what does that look like? Looks like, I don't know, an insect's eye or something. So when we pulled that opto isolator off, we've just managed to rip the pad away, so that's fantastic. That, well done to me. And you can actually see kind of the glue and the maybe bits of the FR4 board exposed there. And the stuff that you see, the gooey stuff you can maybe see in the hole, that's the remnants of the flux that I was using. Yeah, it really is quite a mess. Ooh, peekaboo, hello. So I'm just waggling through a bit of fine solder there, just well, for no reason, but it looks interesting. And it is quite interesting to see at such a high magnification how limited the depth of field is on the microscope camera I've got. So let's have a look at the next sorry affair. And yeah, it looks like I've managed to keep. Did I manage to keep a slight bit of pad intact there? I'm not sure whether I did or I didn't. Again, a bit of a mess, isn't it? I don't know if it's just me, but all this jiggling about's making me feel a bit seasick. Okay, here's a pad that I didn't manage to totally destroy, and as you can see, that one's a ground plane pad. I forget what they call that kind of pad connection to a ground plane. I think it's just designed to help manage the thermal mass of the ground plane and to stop things distorting when you actually put a lot of heat into these. I think that's mainly the purpose of that kind of relief around the pad. So I don't know if you can see there, I've just chosen to get the leg off one of the opto isolators, and I've just stuffed it back into the hole. So you can see there's actually quite a lot of clearance around that leg, around the leg of the component and the hole. Okay, so we've just switched over again. Okay, so we've just made another change and we're using... Okay, so we've just made another change and we're now using our old friend Mr. Solder Braid. Yeah, and I'm afraid I'm actually quite embarrassed again at the state of my soldering iron tip. I really should have given it a good clean, shouldn't I, before I started plunging it away in this fur-covered hole. Of course, I'm referring to the solder braid there. And I'm just using a little bit of flux just to give it a helping hand, because it does always help to use some flux with solder braid. Now, I've used solder braid a lot in the past, and mainly I use it for surface mount work, where you just want to maybe clean up a pad after you've removed a surface mount device. But I tend not to get a lot of luck with it when you're trying to desolder through hole components like this. Solder braid is very good at removing solder of anything it directly touches, but it's not really so good for wicking away the solder from you know, the through hole plating which surrounds the pin. So it can absorb it from the surface, but I'm afraid that it's a little bit of a battle between the surface tension of the solder and the pin, and you know, a fight between the wicking ability of the solder braid, and usually the you know, the solder in the hole will win. And of course the other problem is, if there is any solder left there at all, when you remove the soldering iron, you get some solder trapped between the through hole plating and the leg of the device, and when it cools down, that solder solidifies and ends up again jamming your part in, so you can't get it out again. So yeah, so when all's said and done, solder braid does have its uses, but it's you know, it's not easy. So I'm just giving everything a really good scrub down again with some acetone, and I think one important lesson that I've learned by making this video is it really is important to remove as much of this conformal coating as you can before attempting any rework, because it wasn't obvious to me before until I looked at the you know, the soldering iron and the board under the microscope, at just how much contamination that there is between the soldering iron tip and maybe the pad and the lead of the device, the leg of it. And I think that that's been one of the battles all along, that I'm just getting so much contamination on the soldering iron tip. I'm not getting the solder hot enough. I'm not getting the solder hot enough to use the suction pump or the you know, the desoldering gun. And even you could see using the soldering wick, a lot of the solder was definitely in its plastic stage. Okay, so let's just rip this bugger off. Come on, come off. You're gonna come, I am gonna win this battle. Let's see how many spiders' legs we can leave behind. Oh, it looks like a dead insect, that, doesn't it? Okay, yeah, destroyed that, didn't we? Oh, you can just see the remnants of a leg sticking out there. So there's one that didn't come out the hole. Well, I think today just goes to show that there's no substitute for brute force and ignorance. And if nothing else, I've shown you all what not to do when you're trying to desolder your components. So if you don't do anything I've done, do everything totally opposite, I'm sure you'll be fine. So until next time, thanks for watching. That'll do. Bye for now.